Uh, okay, I am going to go to our next panel, which is our Jones Act carriers. And our speakers are Ann McIntyre, San Francisco Bar Pilots, Ed Washburn, Pasha Group, Torey Presti, National Shipping, and Peter Schrappen, American Waterways Operators. Ann McIntyre is in the south of France as we speak, but her heart and mind is still with her brothers and sisters in Northern California. Good morning from us and good afternoon to you, Captain.
Good morning, and yeah, thanks for inviting me to speak a little bit here today. I don't have any slides, but I did have a couple of things that I wanted to touch on. And first of all, since this is a Jones Act panel, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the Jones Act and some thoughts on that. And like, if the pandemic taught us anything, it was how important having a strong maritime industry is for national security and for the economy. And I'm just flummoxed that we have legislators and businesses in this country that don't appreciate the value of a strong domestic maritime industry. For the San Francisco Bar Pilots, it's super important on our local level because U.S. mariners are the future pilots. We need a strong candidate pool, and we need to support our maritime academies. I mean, not only do they provide our mariners, but they staff our ports, our shipping companies, our logistic companies, not to mention the military. And I just find it unfortunate that we don't get the attention we deserve, particularly after what was experienced during the pandemic. And, I'll say, personally, I began my career as a graduate at Cal Maritime as an able seaman on a Jones Act tanker. And without the Jones Act, I wouldn't have had, the career that I've had today. So personally, I'm a big supporter of that, as are the San Francisco Bar Pilots. And so a little bit about San Francisco Bar Pilots. We're an organization of 52 licensed pilots. We serve 9 Bay Area ports. Port of Oakland is our primary customer. We take vessels all the way up river to Stockton and Sacramento, all the way down to Redwood City and in Monterey. Currently, we service about 7,300 commercial vessels a year. Prior to the pandemic, that number was closer to 8,800. As far as what's happened in the past year in the Bay Area, from the waterborne side of things, we're still recovering from COVID. Gross tonnage, which is a good proxy for how much cargo is coming and going from our area, is down 33% compared to 2019, and that's mostly at the Port of Oakland with the container traffic. That's been caused, some of it is the pandemic shift where, Port of Oakland and Bay Area ports were bypassed just because everything was so delayed. It's also a result of the longer term shift of cargo to the Gulf and East Coast ports. And some of it is the cargo being relocated due to the uncertainty of the labor agreements here on the West Coast. The A's ballpark situation didn't help things much for us, but it sounds like that may now be behind us, and perhaps there'll be some opportunity for maritime growth in that area. I think on a positive note, the cruise is back in San Francisco. Cruise ships are coming in more than they ever have before, and that's been a big boost for the Port of San Francisco as far as maritime is concerned. And as far as San Francisco Bar Pilots, one of the seminal things that happened to us in the past year was the passage of Assembly Bill 2056. That was a landmark piece of state legislation which reforms significant parts of pilotage regulation in the Bay Area. And I will say that the most significant aspect of this bill was that it was a consensus bill between the pilots and industry, and that included PMSA, CLIA, and WISPA. And, I'd say that that's probably something that neither the legislature or the governor's office ever thought would happen, that all the parties would come to the table and accomplish such a broad bill. And included in that bill was much needed emergency revenue relief, which we still very much appreciate because the ship traffic hasn't recovered. And, you know, in running a pilot organization, it's 100% dependent on the revenue being generated from the vessels that are calling. We don't receive any state funding. There's no tax dollars that go towards the pilotage system. Another component of that bill was the advanced funding of pilot vessels. We were working with industry to figure out ways to reduce the cost of obtaining and operating the pilot vessels. So we'll now be collecting money in advance and creating funds that will support the system over decades to replace pilot vessels as that becomes necessary. And the other thing that it did was it revised the rate setting process for how pilotage rates are set. There was a very politicized rate setting process in California, and now it's changed to a much more streamlined and evidence-based system that all the users of the pilotage system support. So another thing that has been happening with us is that any day now we're going to be taking delivery of a new pilot vessel. This is going to be the first pilot vessel in the United States with Tier 4 engines. We're super excited about that. That's being built by Snow Shipyard up in Seattle. We're currently conducting sea trials with that and expect to have it in service in the Bay Area here within the next month. And related to pilot vessels, one other thing I wanted to touch on, and I think my fellow panelists will probably be touching on this as well. Something else that's been impacting us a lot are the California Air Resources Board, the CARB regulations that went into effect on January 1st this year. Pilot vessels prior to the implementation of this regulation were not subject to commercial hovercraft regulations, and now we are. And while we strongly support reducing emissions, and you know we're all about new technology, but you know as far as where the rubber meets the road on this, compliance is going to be difficult. The regulations are going to be requiring all 5 of our pilot vessels to be replaced by 2028. You know, with the way inflation is going, it's going to be probably a $50 or $55 million build program. And right now, it doesn't look like, you know, there's going to be funding support outside of, you know, it being paid for by our customers. And that's a lot of money to ask for over such a short period of time. And, you know, some of the other challenges we're facing with that is that the new technology that supports the type of unique service that our pilot vessels are in. We loiter offshore a lot. We don't run at full speed. Our pilot boats are on station up to a week at a time before they come back in. And there's just not a lot of good technology out there yet. And the technology that is available is hard to get with super long lead times. And that is going to be a challenge for us. And, you know, the other big challenge along those lines is that everybody in the, you know, commercial hovercraft world in California is having to comply with these. And shipyard availability is going to be difficult. Finding slots to build these boats in the next couple of years is going to be hard to do. So we're working towards hard making, you know, all that work, but it's going to be a challenge. And that's all I have for you to report today for what's happening. I know we don't have a lot of time, so I'll be more than happy to cede the rest of my time to my fellow panelists.
Captain, thank you very much for that. Glad to see that we have the new regulation, the new bill that you talked about provided revenue relief. Is that correct? So yes. Long-term, your finances are in satisfactory shape as a result of the state legislation?
Yes, they're much more stable, and the new rate setting process, when that goes into effect, we'll be working, collaboratively with industry to find, ways to fund the pilotage system that makes sense for everyone.
Thank you very much. Captain, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your holiday in Europe, and we hope to see you home soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Our next speaker is Ed Washburn, Senior Vice President, Fleet Operations at Pasha Group. Ed speaks to us every year at Jones Act time. It takes time from his schedule. I said at a previous call we had several months ago that since the delivery of the first ship, Ed looks 10 years younger, and he's made a remarkable progression. Most of us aren't quite so lucky. So Ed, good morning, and what is the news from Pasha Group?
Hey, thanks, Stas, and happy Maritime Day, everybody. So I do have slides, and Todd, if you could put those up, I'll start with those. But I think I'll just start with some of the projects we're doing that are unique to the Jones Act, and a little bit of celebration of the Jones Act, and certainly a shout out to our mariners who are the backbone of the Jones Act. In the labor organizations that provide just a steady, reliable service. So shout out to them also. So I'll start with the opening here in the salute. This is unique to this picture. This is our first revenue run between Oakland and Long Beach on our new LNG powered container ship, George III. So if we go to the next slide, Todd, this is the Pasha family women. Unknown to me, apparently this is my new favorite shirt. I'm wearing it today. But anyways, this is the christening in Long Beach. So next slide. This is our new vessel, the George III. It was built at Keppel Amfeld shipyard. It's a $250 million ship. It is the most hydrodynamically efficient container ship in the world today. And when it was built, the underwater hull is extremely efficient. It was optimized by 3 different companies, brought to the Maritime Institute of the Netherlands, further optimized, model tested. We're very proud of it. And along with the efficient hull and efficient rudder and propeller is a natural gas powered propulsion system and electrical system. Next slide. This is the sister ship, the Janet Marie. This is coming in from sea trials that just took place successfully the beginning of May this year, so just a month ago. All good there. She'll be delivered mid to end of June, and in service July of this year, starting in Long Beach. She'll call Long Beach, Honolulu, and Oakland. Next slide. So this is a new company we started to fuel our ships called West Coast Clean Fuels. It's going very well. We get our LNG in Boron, California from Clean Energy. We have 40 ISO tanks that can hold the liquid at temperature for 100 days. But we fill them up. We bring them to the terminal, PRA, SSA in Long Beach, which has been a great partner. We queue them up there, and the ship comes in. We dray them over to a pumping skid. It says 6 300-gallon-a-minute pumps, and we can fuel the ship in less than 8 hours, which is good for a trip and a half, and we fuel every trip. So this has been very successful. We're also, West Coast Clean Fuels is fueling hydrogen. We've fueled hydrogen in Bellingham, Washington, and now we're just permitted and ready to bunker in San Francisco for the ferry to sea change. On the next slide is why we picked LNG. So when we contracted the ships, LNG was the only available fuel for high horsepower with any infrastructure. And the most important thing with LNG is the dramatic positive effect to the health of our port communities. I was recently at a conference, and a fellow from Corpus Christi terminals was there. His statistic was, if you lived in the port community of Corpus Christi, your life expectancy is 15 years less than if you didn't. And that's directly attributable to pollutants in the port areas. So LNG as a fuel, it eliminates particulate matter, which is the black dust all of us in terminals are familiar with, that is the #1 reason for respiratory disease in the port areas. It also eliminates sulfur oxide, which when it mixes with the air and the humidity in the air, creates sulfuric acid, which is acid rain. And also on the greenhouse gas, it eliminates nitrous oxide by 90% and CO2 by 25%. So we're an advocate of LNG. It'll get us well past 2030 regulations. I think with carbon capture or maybe even bio or renewable LNG, that it will be the fuel of the future. Next slide, please. Moving on, this is a conversion that we're doing. This is a 1980 steamship that was built in Avondale. It was built as a last ship. In 1990, actually, I was with Sealand and we converted it to a container ship. And now in 2023 with Pasha, we're converting it to an LNG powered container ship. This is just an example of the design. And this ship will be going on sea trials in June, LNG sea trials in July, and delivery end of July. Next slide. This is the ship just a couple months ago with the LNG tanks on the stern, but looking that we're redoing the whole ship. Project's going very well. Unique to this project is we're basically recycling 12,000 tons of steel. So the greenhouse gases associated with creating 12,000 tons of steel that we're not emitting is almost greater than the emissions from the life of the ship for propulsion. So it's a great benefit to the environment to repower a ship and keep the good steel. Next slide. This is a little bit what we're doing with the Maritime Administration. We've in the last year, we've managed this training ship Golden Bear. We did a cruise with cadets from all the different academies, got really sentimental and meaningful responses back from the cadets. They really enjoyed being with commercial mariners. We had ladies come up to us and tell us that they were not going to go to sea until this cruise, and now they're considering it. So it was a win-win for everybody. We also managed the Empire State and crewed it, and we crewed the state of Maine. We're currently managing a Bob Hope class, the Nelson V. Britain. This ship has 350,000 square feet of deck cargo space. It's made to carry tanks and other military equipment in case of war. It's a very cool ship. It's at San Francisco Pier 96 now. And we also do some labor berth contracts for Marrone. Next slide. Okay, so this is our terminal constructions. This particular terminal is in Hawaii. It's called Kapalama Container Terminal. It's a public-private partnership. It's a $500 million investment. Our old terminal is in the foreground next to our ship there in the picture. What this terminal will do is our barge dock will be on the left side of this picture, and so that will eliminate 75,000 truckloads on the road going from ship to barge that go to the other islands. We'll put 5 cranes on here. Our responsibility in this terminal is the private part of the public-private partnership is all the buildings. We're developing a microgrid, which I'll get to, and also all the cranes and the gate infrastructure and everything that makes the terminal work other than the land and the dock. Next slide, please. So this is cool. This is going to be the only terminal in the world like it. We're developing this terminal. Well, first of all, we developed a new company called Pasha Energy Services, and we've designed a microgrid and going to install and permit it. But on each of the cranes, we're going to have wind walls. Wind walls is a new type of wind generator. We're in a joint venture with the company. And it's very dense, and it's a wind turbine. Birds don't fly through it because you can't see through it. We can produce 100 kW and basically a 8 by 12 foot wall. And so very dense. They can go on top of cranes, on top of buildings. So in this, we'll have solar on our buildings. We'll have crane regeneration, which I'll explain to in a minute. But as we lower the load on the cranes, we'll turn those into generators, and we'll store that electricity. And then we'll have a natural gas generator as a backup in case of natural disaster that lasts more than 36 hours. But the system, if we go to the next slide, this is what will be powering the system. So wind walls, regenerative cranes, solar, natural gas generator, then we'll have very big battery storage. And this terminal will be able to operate without the grid, all facets of the terminal for 36 hours. And that includes gates and buildings and air conditioning, including 2 cranes with the capability to lift 1,200 loaded containers. So this is really cool. It's a $132 million project. We have a $47 million grant from the Maritime Administration for the Port Infrastructure Development Program, and we're super excited about it. And if we go to the next slide, this is part of the equipment that we've got with Pasha Energy Service. This is actually our crane in Wilmington, California, where we're developing the same type of terminal. Terminal's already existing, we're retrofitting it. This terminal will run 2 8-hour shifts with 2 cranes without the grid. But if you look on the left-hand side, the blue is the energy it consumes to lift the load, green is neutral, and red is the energy you can create by lowering the load. And so we're storing that energy. And if you just store the energy and use it only on the crane, you can save 45% of your power bill on crane utilization. Next slide, please. Okay, a little bit of challenges and outlooks. The outlooks are better than the challenges. Challenges aren't too bad. If we go to the next slide, basically, if you look at the graph, Hawaii's tourism and spending is back to where it was in 2019, a little bit off, but unemployment is good. There's not much of a labor shortage. Real income's growing 2.5% annually. So the what we see in Hawaii is we're almost back to 2019 levels, and we have seasonal adjustments at cargo where we have surges and lows, which were kind of mirroring where we were before the pandemic. So the market is healthy, plenty of construction. Next slide. On the visitor side, back to almost 10 million visitors, increase in visitor spending, expecting the Asian tourists to come back. They actually spend much more money than the US tourists. So that will help when they start coming back. They have started, but that's a slow process. Next slide. So this is the Jones Act, and I'll kind of mimic what Ann said. It's just how important it is. Our mariners during the pandemic, we were on time almost 99.6% of the time serving Hawaii. Mariners made job call every day. They sacrificed. We didn't wait in line. We didn't. More importantly, we didn't raise rates, and we didn't abandon our customers. So where we could have taken our ships and went trans-Pacific and made $24,000 a container, we stayed with our customers in Hawaii, where we have our big investment, and we will be long-term, and got nowhere near $24,000 a container, but we didn't abandon them. We didn't raise rates, and we stuck to our guns, and that'll pay dividends in the future. One thing we're super proud of, the Quest for Logistics by Logistics Management, which is the quest for quality. We won the top ocean carrier in the world. Not only did we win the top ranking, but we won the top ranking on every category. We were the top in the world on time, top in the world in value, top in the world in IT service, top in the world in customer service, and top in the world in equipment and operations. So that's huge for us. It's an honor to be recognized. But again, it's the Jones Act sailors that, as well as the company personnel ashore, that made that happen. But it is a tribute that a Jones Act carrier gets that and does so well in it. We always have Jones Act bills coming through that want foreign operators. We recently had one for LNG to waive the Jones Act, and this was actually a bill change, not a law, not a waiver, but a law. It got voted down right away. Always Representative Ed Case is is introducing anti-Jones Act legislation. It always gets shut down. I think right now through the American Maritime Partnership, we have a good voice for pro-Jones Act. The current administration is pro-Jones Act, but we have to stay on our guard and make sure that we keep that up, and everyone understands the importance of it. And part of the importance is, and if we just looked at China, right? If we don't have the Jones Act, that is China's entry to control our 12,000 miles of river. And basically, they will subsidize it. They will take over our non-contiguous and contiguous delivery system. And then that'll be in peacetime, and they'll have influence. And then when there's a conflict, they'll leverage it against us or deny it or threaten it. So really, the Jones Act prevents that. Also, that's national security. And again, if we allow our 12,000 miles of inland waters to be run for anyone, not Americans, to operate on there, then we've really increased the responsibility of the Coast Guard with terrorist threats and others. And then in economic security, as we know, there's 650,000 jobs from the Jones Act, and it's great for our security. And really, we should be growing it and not letting it be stagnant. On the next slide. If you want to support the Jones Act and be knowledgeable in it, this is American Maritime Voice is a good website, so please take a look at it. And the next slide, just a little shout out to women. WISTA is a great organization. I presented there recently. We definitely support women in shipping here. It is as we always say, we need more mariners, and we have the opportunity to bring women mariners into the industry, and we should really be promoting it. We were very proud on the Golden Bear. We were able to have 11 crew members as women out of 25. That was a record for us, including the captain, chief mate, and port engineer. We're all women. Next slide will be a thank you, and thank you, Stas, and happy Maritime Day.
And thank you very much. Real quick question. The price tag on the Kapalama terminal is how much?
500 million.
Okay. And you expect it to become operational in when?
Q1 of 25.
And can you give me a quick definition of what a wind wall is?
A wind wall is a micro turbine using aerospace design and materials, built in Huntsville, Alabama. Basically, it's a wind generator that can produce, it'll start producing electricity at 1.5 miles an hour. It won't cut out until 145 miles an hour, because it's multiple blades and it's very compact. Birds don't fly through it. Each module is 9 inches by 9 inches by 13 deep, and each one can produce 1 kW, and you stack them up.
And how many are on a crane?
Well, 100 kW will be 100 small stacks, and it's U.S. technology, and it's new technology. We're their first customer.
Okay. And these things have a kW capacity of what?
Right now, up to 100 kW
Per wind wall?
per wind wall.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And you put 100 of them on a crane?
No, we're putting 5 by 100 kW in Hawaii, and then in Wilmington, we're putting a prototype, which is an 18 kW.
Very good.
Installed in June.
Thank you very much. Ed, very interesting. Thank you very much for this. And we will hopefully be back with you next year.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is my good friend, Torey Presti, who I believe is back, or at least has departed from the Sons of Italy dinner that he went to for Augie Talese last night. God, you Sicilians, you all stick together. You know, our Greeks are very envious of the way you guys keep it together. So welcome, Torey. And what is the news from National Shipping?
Okay, well, thanks. I did, in fact, the dinner is on Thursday night, Stas, so I'll tell you if they've made good tortellini or not.
All
So
right.
I'll let you know about that. And some good news today. I did visit with Marat today, and one of the notes that came back was that the CCF, the Capital Construction Fund, is now extended to Jones Act carriers. So that basically is any profits you make, you can roll over into like a 401k and then use it to build a new ship or repair a ship or refurbish something. So that's a positive on it. So anyway, today though, we're going to talk about from Hawaii to Puerto Rico. So if Todd, thank you very much for your help. If you could help me with the slides, that would be wonderful. All right, so this is it, May 23rd, the day after Maritime Day, and everything is hopping back here because of they had a big function yesterday. I did not attend it because I got in late. But anyway, next slide is our national glory. She's a small 570 TEU fully cellular vessel, takes about 96 reefers. Oops, let me turn that off if I can find it. Sorry about that. I apologize. And I'm in a Matchbox hotel room here. She was she was a unique vessel because she was not built in America. She was a forfeiture vessel, actually built in Poland. So, but we reflagged her and got the Coastwise endorsement on our COD. And we decided to, as Horizon left the trade in 2014, we stepped in a little bit early, but we stepped in 2013. Next slide. This is our 10-year anniversary. This actually May 29th. So 10 years servicing Houston, Port Everglades, and San Juan. Next slide. A little history and a timeline. 1493, Columbus anchors off of Puerto Rico, and he calls it Saint John the Baptist or San Juan Baptista. And then they changed the name to Puerto Rico, meaning rich port, when they found a lot of gold right at the port. And the Taino Indians basically told the Spaniards, take as much as you like. So that lasted almost 400 years. We bring it up to 1898, where the Spanish-American War happens. And under the Treaty of Paris, Spanish cedes to Puerto Rico, Cuba, Guam, and the Philippines to the United States. The first Jones Act was called the Jones-Shafferth Act, and that just granted U.S. citizenry to Puerto Ricans in 1917. That coincided with the beginning of World War I. And then in 1920, our favorite act, the Jones Act, is born under the Merchant Marine Act. From 48 to 68, well, really from 1920 to 68 was, Puerto Rico was primarily a agrarian. It was a sugar, they had sugar cane. And that was phased out. They didn't mechanize the farms. There was a strong lobby in Louisiana, as you know, being the sugar home. And they were not able to really mechanize enough on the farms, and therefore they decided in 48 to start this program called Operation Bootstrap, which basically took the Puerto Rico from an agrarian economy to an industrial, mainly in the southern part of the island, which was where they had most of the sugar cane. They created tax incentives that were established that led to a surge of mainly big pharma to set up operations. From 70 to 90, I guess it was probably the peak. Tourism flourished. San Juan became the capital of the Caribbean for the cruising. And then kind of there was a lot of mistakes that happened. The tax incentives were rolled back in 95, and some of the pharma people left the island. The U.S. Navy, because of the ACUS and some incidents there, they decided to leave in 2003, and things happen that way. So anyway, then of course, fast forward to 2017 with Maria, devastating typhoon or hurricane, and Fiona in 22. Next slide, please. The demographics are not really solid for the island. There's currently there are 5.5 million Puerto Ricans that reside in the U.S. Mainly, it started in New York, but Florida is overtaking that, and Texas is getting larger as well. So we'll talk a little bit about that later and how the Puerto Ricans kept their taste for what they liked in Puerto Rico, which creates an interesting northbound trade, which is, as you know, southbound bias. But the death rate exceeds birth rates for the first time. There's only 3.1 million Puerto Ricans on the island. 43% are living in poverty, or about 1.4 million. And that they rely on what they call the NAP program. They're not part of the SNAP program. SNAP is basically your food stamps. So you have 43% of the people on food stamps. And that really dictates how the economy goes. So if under the Farm Bill, Puerto Rico gets some, is elevated to what they call SNAP, it's a nutritional program, then you start to see the business pick up. But right now, the business is soft. The economy does not favor the young intelligentsia. They're all moving back to stateside to find good paying jobs. And really, the economy is very much dependent on federal aid. As I mentioned earlier, the USDA SNAP and NAP programs. Next slide, please. I think if there's something exciting about the island, is this PR 100. It's a local initiative where the island is going to be self-sufficient on renewable energy by 2050. And they have some aggressive milestones. For example, the year 25, they're going to be 25% self-sufficient. They're not going to reach that because of the pandemic, but they have a very aggressive plan. And the Department of Energy, and kudos to our secretary, Janet Granholm. She is personally involved in this, along with FEMA and the local Puerto Rican government. And they've started to release over $13 billion for the migration to the renewables. Also, though, upgrading the current power transmission and distribution. And you're going to see a lot, as Ed talked about, gas playing a big role in this. Unfortunately, geographically, the way they set up after Operation Bootstrap, when they started to switch from agrarian to industrial, they concentrated the power down in the south. So what you have is all the power generation in the south, but now with what's going on, the consumption is in the north. So you've got this main grid that every time a Maria or a Fiona or Irma comes through, it just slices the island in half, coming right through, and it just the whole island goes black because they're dependent on a main grid. But what they're trying to do, which is smart, is they're decentralizing into microgrids, and most of the renewables are solar. There is some wind, but most of them is solar. So what they do is there's for low and income, you can get a grant to put solar on your house, and that feeds into a microgrid. So if a terrible hurricane comes, and it will again, it will only wipe out like a neighborhood rather than the whole island. And that's been the biggest problem. Next slide, please. I always like to call us at the Jones Act really more of a utility than just transportation. We're there, and we're a very small part of it, but Crowley and Tote are there because they're the biggest players. They're there in peacetime and in crisis. They've made huge investments, not only in the ships like Pasha, not only in the LNG, but the terminals. They introduced a 53-foot container. The jury's still out on that, but they've introduced that. So there's a lot more than just transportation that you can get from a foreign flag vessel. Not to mention that you have, I think, 6 sailings a week from the US to San Juan directly. So you get there in 3 days versus 17 days if you take one of the global guys who transship it over Caucedo or Kingston or Freeport. So it's definitely, the next slide, I think sums it up. Todd? Okay, now here's what happened during the pandemic. And you can see, as Ed alluded to, we kept our customers and the prices and the freight rates at that low level. Let's use the $4,200. That didn't move when you saw the spikes and what happened to the global guys. And the spikes are basically I took a Shanghai, New York rate, all water, versus our 40-foot rates from Houston to San Juan. Next slide. The M2, where we have been participating in the American Marine Highway, and we have established in 2020 an M10, which was Houston to South Florida. It included M95 because you were able to take South Florida origin freight that goes to San Juan and not have to truck it to Jacksonville. So this time, the way they wrote this one, and it's really political if you can, so this time you really had to be, I call it a kind of a woke type of tender. And they were looking for disadvantaged people that need help financially, historically disadvantaged communities, economic deprived, and that all fits the role of Puerto Rico. If a typhoon or hurricane hits San Juan, you're dead in the water. The island is really dead. So we've said, well, we'll call Ponce and try to establish. There are 2 container cranes that aren't working there, but will be by October. And they have a mobile harbor crane in Ponce. Now, you're not going to really put a dent in things, but you will have another outlet for containers. Right now, if San Juan goes down, we're in big trouble. And it's not just the port. Once you get out, we saw this in Maria, once you got into the port, trying to deliver freight where there's no lights and people are worried about their homes, it was very, very challenging and difficult. Next slide, please. So this is a project, we call it Project Ponce, and it's we're establishing a monthly service. This all depends on the grant. We will give full container availability. And the nice thing about it is that it has heavy lift capability of up to 200 tons with the mobile harbor. And we were satisfying the economic, environmental, and social benefits by limiting truck miles from highway miles. Next slide. The weather is always challenging to the trade. Hurricane season, June through November, in the Caribbean, South Atlantic, and U.S. Gulf. We experienced Maria in 2017, which was devastating. Fiona in 22, constant earthquakes in that part of the world. The tragedy of the El Faro in 2015, victim of Hurricane Joaquin. And then we also, calling Houston, have a long fog season in the channel from November to April. So it's not an easy place to trade. Next slide. Including that, on the way home to Houston, we've done 3 rescues of Cuban refugees within 4 months, last October, saving 43 lives off the coast of Cuba. Next slide. Again, here's where we are with the Marine Highways, the M10 linking Houston with South Florida, the M95, and now the M2, which has an official designation by the Maritime Administration. So we're hoping that plays well. Next slide. Oh, I guess that is it. So then that's basically it, Stas from Puerto Rico.
Torey, question. Is it M1 or M2?
They designated M2.
Okay. And the rationale, the big rationale is that Puerto Rico was really devastated by Maria, right?
Maria, then Fiona, and then also in the South, they've had these terrible earthquakes that lasted over a year. Every day, earthquakes.
So you can't operate. So I think you had a situation where the electricity was out, the gates didn't open, and you couldn't get your trucks in and out of the port, right?
It was challenging, but I tell you, the Jones Act carriers lived up to what they did do right, and they were able to recover. There were not casualties that we knew of, per se.
And going to Ponce then gives you a waterborne way of keeping transportation from the north and south open in the event that a hurricane disables the roads and the infrastructure.
That's correct. That's correct. And also down in the south, which I didn't mention, there's like 4 key power plants down there that need transformers and need poles and all types of support. So that's the South has some interesting opportunities. There's also in Salinas, we have 8,500 Puerto Rican National Guard station there at the camp in Salinas, Camp Santiago. So they're down south. And then last but not least, FEMA. FEMA just opened their 3rd recovery warehouse down in Ponce last October. And FEMA realized they were so under-equipped for Fiona and Maria that they've increased everything from the water to the blankets to the generators, etc. So those 3 really will propel, I think, justify a Ponce call.
Okay. So who's going between? Is your ship going there?
Not yet. No, we don't go to Ponce. We go to San Juan on a Wednesday. We arrive on a Wednesday, and we can actually be in Ponce on Thursday morning.
Very good. Okay. Okay, Torey, thank you very much. We really appreciate you coming back and being with us time and time again. You are one of our regulars. And one last question. You're going to be in the market for a new ship, correct?
That's a trade secret.
All right.
If the price is, we're definitely evaluating it. Definitely evaluating it, Stas. As you know, building ships in America is not an easy task by any means, and I can defer to Ed on that one. And then adding injury to insult, the prices have gone up even greater. So since the war. So, but anyway, we are definitely evaluating that.
Very good. Torey, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Okay. Our last speaker is Peter Schrappen. Peter is the Vice President for American Waterways Operators. We've been in touch with a lot of the work that AWO does because I interviewed Jennifer, the Carpenter, the president, every year. And we are very, very pleased to have Peter out on the West Coast and joining us for the first time. Peter, welcome.
Hey, everybody. Thanks, Stas. Thanks for inviting me. I'm bringing us home here, and I think it'll be hopefully some new information for you. So I say, before we dive into our issues, I'd love to get our slides up if that's possible, and I can give you a thumbnail sketch of American Waterways Operators. I'll say that AWO is the 79 years young trade association and represents the U.S. flag tugboat, towboat, and barge industry. We're the advocate, resource, and united voice for safe, sustainable, and efficient transportation on America's waterways, oceans, and coasts. And our industry safely and efficiently moves over 665 million tons of cargo each year. So I'm based in Seattle, and California is one of the states that are part of my portfolio. Can you go ahead and advance the slides, please? So there's a few highlights there. You know, I'll throw some numbers at you, then we'll dive into specifics. But in California, we move over $300 billion worth of manufactured goods. That's electronics, appliances, machinery through California's waterways each year. Next slide, please. You know, you heard from, I think it was Deb earlier, just how we stack up with other modes of transportation. This is a nice slide that demonstrates that. I will say that we are a key link in California's agricultural industry. We move $34 billion worth of product each year through California's waters. Next slide, please. So yeah, how does the marine transportation system stack up? We're a $970 million industry that has to do with the annual revenue. Next slide, please. So yeah, that's how we're going to be talking about as our first priority, which Captain McIntyre mentioned earlier. It has to do with the commercial harbor craft rule that took effect on January 1st, 2023. There are a series of requirements with this rule that I wanted to underscore, and I'll cut to the chase right here. The rule began in January by requiring vessels to use renewable diesel, what's called R99, and reporting the vessel movements, and eventually by 2034, mandates that vessels adopt Tier 4 engines with yet to be developed diesel particulate filters or DPFs. Well, what's so bad about that? I can hear you asking me, Stas. CARB's requirements are not technologically feasible. They're forcing vessels to adopt equipment that has not been invented yet, has not been signed off from ABS, and has not been checked off by the Coast Guard. The timeline moves too quickly. As a lot of you know, it takes about 3 years to retrofit a vessel. So yeah, we've got a lot of tough sledding ahead of us. The first vessel tier compliance deadline is December 31st, 2023, so right around the corner. We're actually now hearing, Stas and others, that vessels cannot even be retrofitted with these DPFs. So we've got workforce and supply chain challenges. So besides that, though, it's going to work really well for us. And also, I'll talk about the marine transportation system challenges. Ship assist vessels, which are part of my membership, will be forced to either stop operating because of non-compliance or move their vessels to the East Coast. The price tag on this one is about $1.3 billion to retrofit. So the gray part of this map here demonstrates the type of vessel, the locality of the vessels where they'll be regulated by this CARB commercial harbor craft rule. It's up to 3 miles off the coast. So what are we doing about all this? We've brought on a lobbyist, Greg Herner, who had success with the sport fishing industry with CARB at the 11th hour in 2021. And actually, a lot of our members are looking forward to June 1st. That's when we'll have a chance to testify in front of the EPA around whether EPA will grant a waiver to CARB as they move forward. And we feel like, and you'll hear in our testimony, that the rule is arbitrary and capricious and not technically feasible. Those are important words that EPA likes to hear, that frame around arbitrary, capricious, and technically infeasible. So you'll be hearing a lot of that during our testimony. Eventually, though, we do have a 4-part ask. We'd like to see more money to offset this $1.3 billion unfunded mandate. We'd like Tier 3 and Tier 4 engines to be able to be used for their useful life. We'd only like to require safe equipment, call us crazy. And we want ATVs to be placed in the at-berth regulation. So I'm going to switch gears and talk about something a little more fun. If you will, please, next slide. Let's talk offshore wind. I'm not going to repeat what you heard from Jeff, but I will underscore a lot of what Jeff had to say. And according to Jennifer Carpenter, Stash, he sends her regards. Offshore wind represents the biggest opportunity for our members in decades. That's a direct quote from Jennifer. The vessels that help build out our wind energy need to be Jones Act vessels, thanks to the recent Coast Guard Authorization Act. You'll see here in this slide a couple of the key areas in California that are trying to work within President Biden's ambitious goal of 30 gigawatts of energy by 2030. So on December 6th and 7th of 2022, BOEM held its 3rd offshore wind lease sale that year, and the first of its kind for floating wind, bringing in $757 million from 5 lease areas, which you'll see in that map there. These lease areas cover 373 total acres, and that's in the Morro Bay and Humboldt wind energy areas. And that's enough power to power up 1.5 million homes. So it's a big step forward for California. It advances President Biden's goal of deploying 15 gigawatts of floating offshore wind by 2035. And it really puts in motion also further West Coast developments. And then I'm going to round out the update here. If I can see the next slide, please. I want to mention the Pacific Port Access Route Study, or PACPARS, that has not been mentioned today as far as I can tell. If you're not familiar with the Port Access Route Studies, the Coast Guard puts these formal studies with the comment period to establish new or adjust existing fairways. The primary purpose of PARS is to figure out safe access routes with other users like renewable energy sites. Another goal of PARS is to reduce marine casualties and increase efficiencies. It's important to underscore that these fairways are voluntary. Comments were due on October 25th of last year, and the Vice Admiral was briefed on the final PACPARS study just last week. So, you know, any moment now, we should be hearing more news on this front. Next slide, please. Before I wrap up, I wanted to share a few parts of our core competency here at American Waterways Operators, and that is certainly government affairs advocacy. And we work on that in a variety of ways. Throughout the year, we go to advocate for our interests in Sacramento, and we offer tugboat tours. That's Felicia, who was on the call earlier. Probably I was there in April to visit with Assemblymember Lowenthal's staffer as we talked about CARB and other topics. Next slide, please. We also host and convene ongoing conversations with the Coast Guard. Here's an example where we were in Southern California with Captain Stephen Bohr, and that's Sean Bennett really making the case around CARB. That's an action shot. And then I'll just conclude my comments with the next slide here. This was just 2 weeks ago when we were in Washington, D.C., just before the WISTA Gala, where we have our annual barge in, and that's Ng Hunswick, Art Mead of Crowley, the new Congressperson Garcia from our Mayor of Long Beach, and Martin Curtin of Curtin Maritime. During these visits and others with the California delegation, we discussed CARB and the importance of the Jones Act. So Stas, I'm gonna hand it back to you.
Peter, thank you.
Stas, you went on mute there.
You're on mute, Stas.
I pushed the button, but it didn't hear me. Peter, thank you very much for this. My question, workforce issues, getting young people into the tug and barge business. I know you're having some challenges. What are you guys doing about it?
Yeah, well, I've got some Regency bias on this front here, Stas, because I'm in Washington State, but there are a number of exciting ventures that are moving forward. There's something called Core Plus, core-plus.org. That's a certification process of 2 years for high school students. After graduation in high school, there's the Seattle Maritime Academy. There's a Maritime High School just south of Seattle. We're working on, and then on the other side of this seesaw, we're working on oral testing at the federal level. That is less draconian of a test than the current cannabis testing that goes back 30 days. So a day doesn't go by, Stas, that we're not thinking and strategizing on how we can find the next, improve the hose pipe.
Peter, do you see a shortfall presently in the mariners that you have or versus what you need?
Yeah, the short answer is yes. I won't give you the age-old depends question. I answer no. Yes, we are always hiring, always looking for workers. Yes, there is a shortage.
Okay, very good.
Hey, Stas, Dennis here. If I could
Yes.
jump in
ahead.
as an advocate for Cal Maritime. The California Maritime Academy is down to 800 or so students.
From what, Dennis?
From pre-pandemic 1,100
Jeez.
to 1,200, yes. And they were impacted pre-pandemic on their license program. And I'm not going to say, I don't have the numbers of what the license program for deck and engineering mariners was, but currently they're not impacted at all. I don't know what the current class is, which obviously had to be signed up and give their deposit by May 1st. But in the last meeting I was at on the Academy a week ago, they are definitely looking for more mariners. They're open. And when I say impacted, that when they can only take so many because of the size of the ship, size of the simulators, and the faculty they have. But currently right now, they're open for anybody who wants a license.
Okay, so that leads me to another question, and I'll leave this to anybody who can answer it. We've been seeing in GCaptain a lot of stories about how the licensing issues have been delayed or not, and I don't know whether Captain Lamb is still with us, but we continue to hear that people who are getting licenses or recertifications are having to face delays in doing that. Can anybody comment on that?
Stas, I'll jump in. I actually think the Coast Guard is working really hard. I just renewed my license for I'm not going to say how many times. But they are working through it, and their online program is pretty good. Some of the certification classes might be impacted because they asked for a lot more, requirements. But anyway, for anybody who wants to go to Cal Maritime to get a license, please apply, and we'll see you on the water.
Okay, very good. Matthew, did you have a question? Okay. Ed, we heard earlier from Luke Lorenz about military sea lift. And as you know, and I think you even mentioned, we've been outsourcing a lot of our sea lift ships from people like Maersk for years. You had some serious challenges getting ships built in the US. But there was a time when we built 2,700 of them between 1942 and 1945. So we know it can be done. Luke also said that there is now being considered a move called the Ships Act, a parallel to the CHIPS Act. Do we need to get a lot more serious about shipbuilding in the United States?
For sure, no question. And actually, this is the first time I heard of the Ships Act, and I'm excited about it. I'm cheering for it. I hope it happens, but it's exactly what we need. We certainly have good labor in the country. Our labor costs are not that much more comparatively to a Korea or Japanese shipbuilder, and we should be able to build a ship competitively with those countries. We won't build competitively with China unless we're heavily subsidized like they are. But yeah, it'll come with experience and with investment in the infrastructure for shipbuilding. And when the jobs are there and the money's spent, the labor will flow to it. And they're good jobs, and they're living wage jobs, and you get to go home every night. And I think we definitely need the investment. There's challenges in the United States building. There's huge challenges building new technology in the United States. We're the only ones in the world that implement rules after construction, after the keel's laid. And that's specific to the Coast Guard only, not class societies, but our state, our state regulators, which is the Coast Guard, do not logically implement rules. They make a new rule or a reinterpretation, and no matter where you're at in construction, it goes to that vessel. And if it's immediate for life or environment or the ship or crew, then we understand and we should accept it. But if it's just something that's better in someone's opinion that's better, then there should be a logical implementation where like class societies do, that everyone collaborates on it, it becomes rule, and then any ship that hasn't laid a scale, it's applied to. One of the things that's hindering new technology in U.S. shipbuilding is the reinterpretation of rules and applying them after construction.
Well, all I can say is, from an outsider standpoint, that really shouldn't be happening. And I know what the impact was on you guys. And I mean, we really shouldn't be shooting ourselves in the foot. But let me ask you another question. The Navy League, as part of the maritime strategy, has suggested that we need to start developing a sea lift capability that operates in commercial lanes that would operate up and down the coast, and that has been the long-term strategy, as you know, of the MARAD, and it hasn't worked. But we do know that if we were to just take one example, running a truck between Oakland and Long Beach, that if we had a Jones Act ship of the size that you have, even actually maybe smaller, we could definitely compete with that in terms of price, and the sailing time is probably 24 to 36 hours, and it takes 4 to 5 days before they can get the container off the dock in Long Beach. Anyway, is it time that for national security reasons that we should be giving these M95 and M5 routes more consideration, and maybe more financial support from the feds?
Yeah, I think, yeah, the M5 routes, the one along California, yeah, if it can become financially feasible, that's good. I think more important for national security, the Maritime Subsidy Program, the MSP program, that works on the East Coast, right? Because you have a trade, you have government impelled cargo where you can have a financially viable shipping company or ships that can stay in operation and be available in case of war. We don't have that type of trade on the West Coast. So we're not bringing much military equipment to Asia, and there's not a robust government impelled cargo coming from there. So that's really the challenge. I mean, I think our biggest threat as a nation now is on the Pacific, and we don't have a way for an MSP or a TSP program to work there. But certainly we are open to it when that opportunity comes. But I think it's going to have to be with some government help.
Okay, very good. Peter, any last comments?
Thanks for having me. Scott's not really, no.
Okay, very good. Guys, I know Ann had to leave, but Torey, Ed, Peter, thank you all very much for participating in this Jones Act panel. We are only 13 minutes late, so I consider myself to have done a good job with your generous support. Thank you all very much for participating. Thank you to our audience for being with us. We really appreciate all of the time that our panelists take to be here. And good luck, Ed, with your new terminal. Peter, with your issues related to CARB, and Torey with Puerto Rico. And global warming and hurricanes aren't going away, and those problems are going to be with us. And that's probably also going to be true for Hawaii, that our weather patterns are changing there too. So on that note, I want to just check, does anybody have any last questions for our panelists before we go? Seeing none, I want to thank you all for being with us, and thank you for sharing your Maritime Day time. And we look forward to being with you next year. And best of luck to the AWO, to Pasha, to National Shipping. And hopefully 2023 will be a good year for us and a good year for the United States. Best wishes to you all, and we will see you next year. Thank you.